In these lessons, we address one of the most challenging topics in this unit: decision-making, risks, and protections associated with masking, vaccination, and other issues that many people are uncertain about. Using recent historical evidence, let's say the last 100 years of data, we model likely mitigation patterns based on the information that is currently available. Part of the scientific process involves seeing how things change over time and making decisions based on patterns that exist in both the current and historical contexts. If we go back to earlier lessons that look at the history of past pandemics, one we did not include was smallpox, which has a relevant history of inoculation. Even in the 1770s, vaccinations were controversial. We made these lessons as information was unfolding and made choices to include relevant examples, not all of the possible examples. Having additional extension discussions about new questions and wonderings, including smallpox for an example, is an opportunity to engage in teachable moments. Wondering about vaccines and the history of vaccines, wondering about how long the pandemic persisted even with inoculation, asking questions about why many vaccines from history are already required for students and healthcare workers, and developing questions about the connections between history and science is a key goal of this unit. We revisit the driving question board as a way to tie together ideas from earlier in the unit with new details, asking two key questions. How do vaccines slow and stop COVID-19, and who is being protected, by examining our decisions to implement specific mitigation or spread reduction strategies.
The Swiss cheese model is used to help students visualize the potential impact of holes in a multi-part system of protection. In this lesson, we treat a community as a multi-part system on purpose. Coming to a clear understanding of community is a very important element of this lesson. We want students to recognize all the layers are moving parts that make up the problems and solutions we find when we deal with challenging scientific and historic events. In this lesson, individual and collective accountability factor into decision-making, action planning, and broader types of reflection too. The final lesson in the unit builds on a need to tell the story of COVID-19. The stories we use as data are based on human experiences. So too are the stories that are being created in this lesson. Telling the story of this time period will become the historical record that future generations will draw upon as new health crises occur. Students can be part of telling the story of the COVID-19 pandemic and how they experienced it. Oppression impacts individuals, institutions, and social systems. In the case of COVID-19, all three forms have likely been experienced by students. The final activities in this unit are designed to help learners navigate the complexity of their own experiences as individuals and as members of social groups, large and small. It is also designed to help students understand the lives of groups that grapple with systemic and historic oppression made more challenging by COVID-19. Finally, learners are asked to take steps to resolve their personal questions thoughtfully through writing. A graphic organizer is used to help learners recount the various actions they may have taken or still hope to take to protect themselves, their families, and members of their community. As a personal means of documenting this moment, we invite students to see these closing tasks as a judgment-free, ungraded acknowledgement of the emotional work they've done during the pandemic.
By the end of the unit, I think first of all, students felt more equipped to have conversations and to make decisions about COVID and its risk to them and their family. So a lot of students talked about feeling like they could have conversations with their parents or guardians or their siblings and feel like they understood what was happening. A lot of them talked about feeling like, oh, now I understand what they're talking about in the news when they say this or say that. So more equipped. I would also say, at the beginning of the unit, a lot of students were, I think, apprehensive to talk about COVID or felt like they had been so inundated with COVID information and discussion that they weren't that excited to talk about it. And so I think by the end of the unit, a lot of kids had found either a sense of purpose and meaning in talking about COVID, like this is really important and we should be talking about it and we should all know about it and everybody should know about it, or a sense of purpose towards, this impacts me or other people in ways that I didn't know before. And I want to make a difference based on that. I want to do something to change that. And lastly, I think the unit also helped ground COVID in a social and historical context that gave kids new ways to think about it and maybe pushed them and stretched them in ways that were uncomfortable but productive, right? So for an example, a lot of students that I had wouldn't have been able to identify before the unit that COVID was having these disparate impacts on some communities. And after hearing that and learning that and seeing that, they left the unit with a sense of, indignation about that, right? Like that's wrong and we need to do something about it, and a sense of purpose and drive to be part of the solution to that, and also to hold people empowered to account for that happening already. So by the end of the unit, I saw a huge transformation in kids, not just as science thinkers, but also as citizens and as participants in the discourse around COVID in their family, in their school, and in their larger community.